Hello, and thank you and welcome to another segment of Camera On with Authors Inside. Today I'm going to be interviewing a very special guest. But before we get started, can you do me a favor? Can you hit the like button and subscribe to receive notification if you want more of this content? The reason why I say this person is very special, because to me, he has a big heart. He sat down with me and helped prepare me for a parole board hearing that eventually I was able to secure my freedom. And throughout this process, you'll be able to understand why I say he's a very special individual to me. He's going to talk about his lived experience. He's going to talk about how long he was incarcerated, some of his challenges, what's his goals, what he's doing today in the community. So, I'm gonna allow him to introduce himself. So, with no further ado, Cameron, how you doing, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Good to see you
um,
this morning.
yeah, would you introduce yourself to our viewers and talk about whatever's in your heart, and we'll just take it from there.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate this space. It's really great to see you. We don't live that far from one another, but we don't see each other that often. So I feel really honored to be invited to have this conversation with you and spend this time with you this morning.
Yes.
My name is Michael Nelson. Other folks know me as Yoshi. For 20 years of my life, I was known as Yoshi inside prison. I committed my crime on January 25th, 1998. I pled guilty to and was sentenced to first-degree murder with 25 years to life in the adult prison system. I was 15 years old at the time of my crime. I served a little over 20 years and secured, like you, my freedom through the Board of Parole hearings in 2018. That was my first hearing. And I was released in 2018. And so that's what, 5 years now this month. I've been out here in this big world. And I've continued going inside since my release. So about 4 months after I started going inside to oversee our program at the California Men's Colony.
Can you talk a little bit more about your program and going inside? You mean going back inside the prison and talk about what program you was able to oversee?
Yeah, so in 2010 at San Quentin State Prison, myself and seven others, the co-founders created a program called Kid C.A.T. That's K-I-D, acronym C-A-T. It stands for Creating Awareness Together. And when we came together, we decided that we are a unique population of folks who are incarcerated. At the time, we were known as juvenile lifers. And so all of us who formed this group committed our crimes while under the age of 18. Since then, the laws will reflect that we now acknowledge youth offenders as being people who committed their crimes under the age of 26, based on brain development research. And our program is all about providing spaces and support for youth offenders. It's about acknowledging the harms that we've committed and our obligation to be of service to others and to give back to our communities. And so one way that we initially started that was through writing a curriculum called The First Step, which you participated in.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and then we've done a number of other projects focused on creating awareness and giving back to inside and outside communities. And through our curriculum, folks are able to explore childhood traumas, develop their emotional intelligence, get in touch with their feelings, have a safe space to be vulnerable and courageous, and face the parts of themselves that either were shut down, put aside, told that they were no good or bad or wrong, and really have a space where they can look at all those places within themselves and unravel maybe the stories that were told to them about who they are in this world, and begin to start rewriting a narrative about who they are, who they want to be, who they've always been, and really celebrating the fullness of who they are as human beings. So that's in a nutshell, Kid C.A.T. and The First Step. And I have to say that in this moment, I think about the folks who are going through our programs, whether it's at CMC, San Quentin, or other prisons throughout California. I just want to acknowledge that they are currently sitting in prison right now. And it feels really important for me to name that and to acknowledge the amazing human beings that they are and the privilege it is to be in space with them every week.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be part of Kit Kat, and what I got most from Kit Kat was that I was able to identify my pain, my fears, my anger, my guilt, my shame with an event, and I felt that that was very helpful, and I want to thank you for that. That's why I
Mm,
hold you very special,
mm,
and I wanted the audience to see why I hold you very special.
mm. Thank you for
Um,
that. And I wanna hand it back to you and say, and I say this to everyone who goes through our program, it is really up to you to do your work, right? Like, we provide a space, we co-collaborate on creating a space. And yes, we have a curriculum and we come in, and it's really up to you all, how you're going to show up. You show up, right? That's your choice. And then how are you going to show up? And so really acknowledging the gift and the courage and the bravery and the love that you have for yourself and the others have for themselves in these spaces where they then feel safe to look at those parts of themselves and to share it with the rest of us. It's a gift. And so I say thank you, and I say thank you to all the other folks who share your life stories with me and the others, because it really is a gift.
Okay, yeah. Our audience, now society is getting familiar with people being incarcerated, mass incarceration, and there's a lot of interest around surrounding that. Can you share with our audience some of your challenges, your feelings, your perspective as it relates to this whole, incarceration since you've been out, and where you at today?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm gonna try to keep it concise
Yeah,
here. There's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
Let me think about challenges and struggles. So I first off, I continue to struggle with the fact that I am somebody who's responsible for harm, deep harm in the world. I committed a crime. And when I
yeah.
think about talking about the system or mass incarceration, as somebody who really aligns with restorative justice values and principles, I must acknowledge first that I'm responsible for harm. And that's the biggest challenge that I still struggle with, that I contribute to the system. The system wasn't just there and I ended up in it. I committed a crime.
Yes.
And so that's the biggest challenge. And I still struggle with that today. And I imagine that I will never stop struggling when I think about that. I'll never have deep feelings when I think about that. Because the impact of my crime continues today.
Correct.
In telling my story today, somebody might feel activated by it or triggered. And so I must be aware that my crime didn't stop when I was sentenced. It didn't stop. The impact didn't end when I was released from prison. It continues. So acknowledging that first, and then going in at the age of 15. I mean, there's, as you can imagine and know, going in young, there were a lot of things I just didn't know. I was scared um, for my
Hmm.
safety, and I just, there's a lot of things that I didn't know about the lifestyle. I'm not somebody who's associated with or affiliated with gangs. I didn't grow up in the lifestyle. And so being immersed into this environment where there was a lot of energy around gang activity, especially in the youth authority at the time, and race, that wasn't a big part of my life growing up. Um, and also violence. I grew up familiar with violence, but not to the degree that I was surrounded by now in the system. And so there
Hmm.
was a lot of learning for me. And early on, a way to cope was I try to keep to myself. I try not to get too involved with all the things. And I knew early on that I need to be abundantly clear with what lane I was in. And so I never tried to pretend that I was somebody that I wasn't. And that's not necessarily true. Uh, as far as the gang lifestyle goes, the violence and all
Hmm.
that, I didn't try to portray myself as somebody that I was not. And I say it's not necessarily fully true because I was also a young gay boy in prison that wasn't fully aware that I was gay. and also didn't feel safe to say that out loud. So I say it's not totally true because there was something that I wasn't totally authentic about going into the system as well. Um, and then coming out, I mean, there's a lot, there's so much to cover, but then I'll fast forward to coming out. Coming out of prison for the first time as an adult, I was, I believe, 36 at the time, if I remember correctly. I'm at an age now where I tend to forget stuff now, but I think I was 36 at the time of my release, and I was dropped off in the middle of the Tenderloin district in San Francisco. Never been to San Francisco, never experienced many and most of the things out here as an adult. And so there are so many challenges that I wouldn't even know where to begin. But I want to acknowledge that the biggest struggle was feeling really lonely.
Mhm.
I was welcomed by a community. I have lots of friends and community in the Bay Area. And even with that said, I felt extremely lonely, and I realized I missed the life that I had lived for 2 decades of my life and the people who I had come to really love, care for, and respect. And that was very difficult for me to grieve the loss of that. And it's not that I wanted to go back to prison, but I miss the relationships. And so, and that continues to pain me a bit when I think about it. And again, I'm privileged that I get to go in and to be in community with folks on the inside. And something else that I struggled with in relation to Kid Cat and other programs that I was a part of is that folks out here, I don't know how to say this exactly, but I learned that folks out here take advantage of folks in prison. And this is a blanket statement. This is generalizing. That doesn't mean it's true for everybody. But somebody tried to steal the Kit Kat name and filed a nonprofit status for it without any approval. And this is a never before incarcerated person. Um, and there's also somebody out in the world today that takes credit for another program that I'm responsible for and has founder on their title of that program. And so it really hurt me to come out here and to see folks not only take advantage of us, exploit us, and use our work and our names to propel them or to somehow be an advantage for them. And I still
Mhm.
struggle with that today. But that's my work. And so I'm figuring out how to resolve that within myself.
I heard you mention this while you was incarcerated, you wasn't fully aware you were gay. At what point did you become fully aware, and what was going on? You had some, did you have some knowledge that you, because you said fully aware, that means you half knew and half didn't know. And the half, at that point when you was incarcerated, the half that you did know, what was going on with you and how did you know?
I've always known since really young that there's something different about me. I didn't have the language, I didn't have the understanding. I just knew that something was different. And when there were expectations placed on me to perform my boyness, my masculinity in certain ways, I remember feeling very conflicted about it, but I didn't know what that was as a child. And I got messages like, you're not supposed to have long hair, that's for girls. Don't play with your sister's toys, that makes you a sissy, right? And even little things that I had a lot of messages around that I just couldn't understand as to why first people close to me were talking to me that way. And second, that I was feeling all these things inside my body and in my spirit, but I couldn't name it. And at the time of my crime, I had a girlfriend at the time of my crime. She's one of my co-defendants. And as much as a 15-year-old can, I experienced a deep love for her, and I still love her to this day. And she knows this. And I was attracted to her. I really care for her, and so that part was conflicting for me as well because I knew there was a part of me that was also attracted to some of the boys that I was around as a kid, right? But I didn't know exactly what that was, and I was too afraid to even name it or act on it in any kind of way. And so that led me into prison as a young person. I still carried these feelings and this inner conflict, but now I'm the fear is compounded. Like the fear is even worse now because I'm in this environment where it feels really unsafe on many levels. And so to name something like that truth for me felt really scary. And so I held on to that. And I think it was around 2003, I met someone at Susanville State Prison. I had two friends that I was really close with. We all worked out together. We played sports together. We did everything together. And he was a different race. And so it was kind of a big deal that the three of us would hang out all the time already. And we developed feelings for one another. And I knew very early on in our relationship that I had feelings for him, is reciprocated, and I felt safe with him. And so I allowed myself to explore that. We didn't tell everybody, our close friend knew. But I looking back, I feel like a lot of people assumed, but just didn't say anything because of their respect for us as individuals. And also just the many relationships that we had, I think collectively, they just turned a blind eye, if you will, and let us just do our thing. And so I knew then, but I still didn't, I wasn't totally honest about it over the years. And I think it wasn't until I want to say around 2013, 14, that, this is now when I'm Mr. Programmer, if you will, and I'm leading groups and I'm facilitating and I'm starting programs and I'm doing all these things at San Quentin. And I'm sitting in this circle talking about relationships. I'm leading a discussion about relationships and showing up authentically in those relationships. And here I am not being totally honest. And as a facilitator, one of my rules, one of my beliefs is we never ask for something that we're not willing to give. And I stopped in mid-sentence and I acknowledged that I'm not being totally honest with everybody. And it's my responsibility as a facilitator to also model the work. And so I said, I want to name that I'm not being honest. And when I think about relationships, I think about a man who I fell in love with in prison, who you all probably all know. This is a different person years later. And that was the first time I spoke out loud. People already knew, people assumed, people talked about me. But this was the first time that I made it very clear. This is a part of who I am. And from that day forward, that's been a true part of who I am. That's not all of who I am. I want to make that clear. I'm not just a gay man.
Mhm.
I and we were many things. And so it's a part of who I am. And so when you met me at the California Men's Colony, I made a conscious decision to not make that a part of my life because I signed up early on at that prison for a dog program to train puppies to become service dogs, as you know. And that was my commitment early on at that prison. And I knew that that other part of me would be a distraction. And it was very clear to me that I needed to focus on my dog and my commitment to the mission. And so, that it's been a journey, now I have a partner. We've been together 3 years, a man. And I still have thoughts about, do I like women as well? Am I attracted to women as well? I think I had this thought a couple days ago. I still grapple with it. And even some of my friends don't believe that I'm really gay. They just think prison turned me that way because that's what some people say. Um, but yeah, it's still just a conversation that I have with myself and allow myself to explore it. I don't blame or shame myself about any of it. I'm curious about it. I explore it. Um, but yeah, that was a lot of words. So I think I'll just pause there.
Um, yeah, I'll thank you. I'm glad you touched on a few things. The first thing I wanted to touch on before you answer it, but let me say two things. One was when you finally spoke out loud and said you were gay, involved in a relationship with another man. People talked about you, and I wanted you to tell the audience what was your feelings pertaining to people talking about how did you feel, and then the second one was that society thinks prison makes you gay, and they think, so you've been in prison, you automatically gay, and I'm glad you touched on that, and we used to always say, my group of friends, no, if you come to prison and be gay, you was gay before you came to prison, or you had a curiosity or something was going on inside of you before you came to prison, you just didn't explore it.
Mm.
So you didn't just come to prison and be gay. You had that going on before you came to prison. So it's not prison that makes you gay. So Those are the two things that stood out to me. And if you could elaborate on the feelings you had came into when you first came out.
Yeah, when people would talk about me, even some of my close friends, even to this day, like I have community members who haven't said it to me, but I've heard through others that they talk about me. I have feelings around it, and I want to say at the beginning, I had this exterior, I had this shell, and I had this narrative that, I don't care what other people think of me. They're not my concern, blah blah blah. And it's taken me some time to realize and to really accept and fully acknowledge that I do care about what other people think about me.
Yeah.
Um, but that was part of my coping. That was my shell. Like, I'm not going to let you get to me. I need to keep this all in. But so at the beginning, I would just push it out. I wouldn't allow it in. And over time, again, I slowly started to accept that, I do care about what other people think about me, especially my friends in my community. And I also acknowledge that how they think about me and what they say about me is theirs. That's not mine. What's mine is, how do I feel about when I think about them talking about me or disagreeing with me or not supporting me, whatever it might be. That's mine. And so it's my work to check in with those feelings and to be with that and to not deny myself of that access. Um, and yeah, so it's still today, like I still struggle with it a little bit, but because I care about the people who I feel hurt by. And that's really what it's about. But I don't feel like I need to convince them of anything. I accept and acknowledge that they are at where they're at, and I respect that. I appreciate that. um and then the other part, let me see if I can remember what we said. The second part, what was the second part again? Sorry.
People got this perception how prison makes you gay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't know the answer to that for everyone. We all have our own experiences. As a man who identifies as gay, I can't know what it's like for the next man who identifies as gay who's incarcerated. I can't know his experience because we all have a unique experience. I will say that I've met people who, how do I say this, have explored their sexuality inside prison that also have wives and children and this other life. And at first, I was very judgy about it. I had judgments, strong judgments about it. I had judgments about myself if I was attracted to a man that had a wife and kids, right? And so there's this whole thing around that. And the thing I've learned over time is that for some of us, like myself, I already had a sense that there was something living inside of me that I wasn't fully aware of going into prison. I've also met people who are in an environment where there's a lack of access. There's a lack of humanity. They're deprived of human contact, of connection, of belonging, of love and touch, hugs, affection, all the things. And so I imagine for some folks in that state of deprivation and just longing for connection, that they might behave in ways that they may not have if they weren't in that situation. And I can't know that, but I imagine for some of them that may be true. But prison definitely did not make me attracted to men. It didn't make me anything. If anything, my time in prison allowed me to explore all the parts of myself and discover the truths of who I am. And so I'm really grateful for that.
Okay. Thank you. Um, Before we go, Mike, thank you. That was well said. Before we go, you have anything else that you'd like to achieve, your goals or anything? Because I believe we have like what, just 7 minutes left of our time.
Anything else that I'd like to achieve or goals?
Yeah.
First off, I am somebody who believes that the healing journey is lifelong. And so I envision one of my goals being to always stay connected, to be in alignment with that truth, that I continue to be on my journey of healing and that never ends. Um, Part of my journey of healing, involves going into prison and being with my community in there and supporting them through Kid C.A.T. And so with Kid C.A.T, I envision, and I'm holding this vision, that we grow as an organization that supports as many prisons as we possibly can in the state of California and beyond with our program, and then growing that to the outside, providing transitional support, including transitional homes, especially here in the Central Coast. There's not a lot of support around reentry and restorative justice and things like that. And so, yeah, growing Kid C.A.T, and let me see. I probably have other goals that are not coming to me right now.
That's understandable.
Yeah,
Um, yes, like I say, Kit Kat was for me. I'm humbled and honored for you being here. Kit Kat is a very unique and amazing program, and Authors Aside would like to in the future do collaborate with you on some projects. Maybe publish some books from people who go through your program or whatnot. Maybe we could figure something out.
definitely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
Mike, man, I appreciate you. Thank you for joining us. And like I say, man, it's been a privilege.
Likewise. Thank
Is there
you.
anything else you'd like
And
to say? Is there anything else you'd like to say before we get off air?
um, I mean, there's probably so many. I talk a lot. I'll just say
Yeah,
that I really appreciate you and Authors Inside, and this platform that you're creating here for storytelling, because storytelling is so important. It is, it's been a practice that's been around forever and it's powerful. And I appreciate folks having the space to tell their own stories in their way. And so really, just honoring the space that you're all creating, for folks like you, for me, for us. And they're important stories to be heard and to witness. And so I really appreciate, not only what you're all creating, but also for having me and for allowing me to speak here today. So thank you.
thank you, Mike. Thank you for your professionalism. And, you always, like I say, you always been, what you see is what you get. And I appreciate you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Okay. Camera off.